Welcome to Wolf Pack Romance, where destiny finds its voice, even in the deepest silence. Today, we begin a new journey, the story of an alpha and his broken mate. This is part 1. Every morning was a battle for survival. Hadassah didn't wake up to an alarm, but to the screaming voice of a man who called her a useless waste of space. Today, the wake-up call was different. A bucket of scalding water hit her chest, searing her skin and leaving her gasping for air in her thin attic room. She was the girl the world called mute, a ghost haunting the halls of Gilgal High in oversized sweaters that hid a map of yellow and purple bruises. She believed she was invisible, a broken thing destined to rot in silence. But everything was about to change. When she walked into Mr. Ezra's math class, a storm was waiting. Boaz, the powerful alpha of the Judah pack, was a tempest of dark hair and intensity. He'd spent his life waiting for his mate, growing frustrated as his friends found their other halves. The moment Hadassah passed his desk, the scent of wood and wildflowers hit him like a physical blow. His wolf Ari roared a single word in his mind, mate. Boaz was captivated, but his joy was short-lived. In the cafeteria, a group of bullies led by Delilah ripped back Hadassah's hood, and the truth was laid bare under the harsh fluorescent lights. Boaz didn't see a weird girl. He saw a battered queen. As the alpha's protective rage ignited, he realized that to claim his mate, he first had to save her from the monster holding her captive. If you're ready to see how a powerful alpha protects his most vulnerable treasure, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the moment the wolf finally bites back. Get down here and make my breakfast, you useless waste of space. The scream shattered the silence. It wasn't how most teenagers woke up, but for Hadassah, a screaming alarm clock was a luxury. Today, the wake-up call came with heat. A bucket of scalding water hit her chest. Hadassah gasped, the sound dying in her throat as the liquid soaked her thin t-shirt. It seared her skin, feeling like fire licking across her collarbone. She curled into a ball on the thin mattress, her body shaking. "Did you hear me?" The man stood over her, holding the empty plastic bucket. "I said move." Hadassah nodded. She didn't look at him. She knew better. He kicked the bed frame, and the metal groaned. Then he turned and stomped out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him, rattling the walls of the small attic room. Hadassah lay there for a second, trying to breathe. The air felt heavy, her skin throbbing where the water had hit. It was red and angry. She needed to move. If she was late to the kitchen, it would be worse. She dragged herself up, every limb heavy, like moving through mud. Her childhood hadn't been filled with toys or parks. It had been filled with moments like this. Survival. She limped to the small bathroom down the hall and peeled the wet fabric off her body. It clung to the burns, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. She turned on the shower, keeping the water lukewarm. The cool spray offered a tiny bit of relief. She reached for the bottle on the ledge. Eucalyptus and mint. It was her one luxury. She scrubbed quickly, washing away the sweat and the fear. Stepping out, she wiped the steam from the cracked mirror and stared at her reflection. It was a ghost. Dark circles sat under her eyes. A small cut marred the bridge of her nose. Her arms were a map of yellow and purple marks. Her hair was a dirty blonde tangle that reached her mid-back. Her green eyes looked dull, like a forest that had burned down. She turned to the side, her ribs pressing against her skin, her spine a series of sharp knobs. The man refused to buy groceries for two, only enough for one. Hadassah looked away. She hated the mirror. She pulled on a pair of black leggings and her favorite gray sweater. It was 3 sizes too big, swallowing her frame. The sleeves hung past her hands. It was perfect. It hid everything. She rushed downstairs, the floorboards creaking under her feet. The kitchen smelled of stale whiskey and old grease. The man sat at the table, staring at the television, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. It was 7 in the morning. Hadassah went straight to the stove. She knew the routine. 3 eggs, a pile of bacon, toast. She worked in silence, the sizzle of the bacon grease the only sound. Her stomach growled, her mouth watering at the smell of the salty meat. She ignored it. This food wasn't for her. She plated the meal, added a cold can of beer to the tray, and walked to the table. Her hands trembled, but she kept the plate steady. She set it down in front of him. She didn't touch him. She didn't speak. She stepped back and waited. He took a sip of whiskey, then picked up a fork and started to eat. Hadassah stood by the fridge, not allowed to move until he finished. She watched him chew, counting the seconds in her head. It was the only way to keep calm. He finished the eggs and drained the beer. Then he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and turned in his chair. His eyes locked onto hers. They were cold, empty. "Hear me carefully," he said, his voice low. It was worse than the shouting. "It is the first day of school." Hadassah nodded, staring at the linoleum floor. "If you talk to anyone," he said, standing up and looming over her, "if you tell them a single thing about this house, I will rip your guts out." He shoved her, and Hadassah stumbled back, her shoulder hitting the fridge. She gasped. "Do you understand?" he roared. She nodded quickly. "Yes," she whispered, the word barely a sound. "Go," he spat. "And if you are late coming home, I will drag you back by your hair." Hadassah grabbed her backpack and ran out the front door without looking back. The morning air was cold, biting at her wet hair. She pulled her hood up, tucked her chin down, and walked fast. Her worn-out Converse sneakers slapped against the pavement, the rubber so thin she could feel every pebble on the road.
Her stomach twisted. Most kids hated school because of homework. Hadassah hated it because of the people. She was the weird girl. The quiet girl. They called her mute. They made jokes when she walked down the hall. They did not know why she was silent. They just knew she was an easy target. The brick building came into view. The parking lot was empty. Panic spiked in her chest. She was late. She pushed through the heavy double doors. The hallway was deserted. The lights hummed overhead. Her footsteps echoed on the polished floor. She hurried to the reception desk. An elderly woman sat behind the counter. She had red hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her glasses were thick. They made her eyes look huge. Freckles covered her nose. Hadassah tapped on the counter. The woman looked up. She frowned. She looked confused to see a student standing there. Then her face softened. "Oh," the woman said. "You must be the new girl." Hadassah nodded. "Hadassah Collison?" Hadassah nodded again. "Right then." The woman shuffled some papers. "I have your things right here." She handed over a small stack. A schedule. A locker combination. A map of the school. "Your first class is math," the woman said. She pointed down the hall. "Room 12C. You better hurry. Mr. Ezra does not like tardiness." Hadassah took the papers. She gave a small bow of thanks. She walked down the long corridor. The numbers on the doors counted up. 12A, 12B. She stopped in front of 12C. She could hear a voice inside. A teacher was lecturing. Hadassah took a deep breath. She gripped the strap of her bag. Her knuckles turned white. She hated walking into a room late. All the eyes would be on her. They would stare. They would judge. She reached for the handle. Before she could touch it, the door swung open. A tall boy stood there. He almost crashed into her. He held a hall pass in his hand. He stopped. He looked down at her. His eyes widened. "Watch out," he said. "You must be the new student." "Hadassah, is it?" Hadassah froze in the doorway. She pressed a thin hand against her chest to calm the rabbit-fast thumping of her heart. She nodded once. Mr. Ezra adjusted the glasses slipping down his nose. He gave her a smile that didn't reach his blue eyes. "I am Mr. Ezra. Welcome." He gestured toward the rows of desks. "Zebulon's your hand if the seat next to you is empty." A girl near the back lifted her arm. She had bright blonde hair and a welcoming grin. "That is Miriam," the teacher said. "Take the seat next to her, Miss Collison." Hadassah stepped into the room. She kept her head down, but her eyes betrayed her. They drifted to the second row. A boy sat there. He wore a crisp white shirt that hinted at the muscle beneath. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were dark brown. Intense. They locked onto hers with a focus that made her skin prickle. He smiled. Hadassah looked away. Her pulse raced. People like him were dangerous. They made her feel things, and feelings were a liability. She hurried past him. She reached the empty desk next to Miriam. Her stomach dropped. It was right next to the window. Hadassah gripped the strap of her bag. She hated windows. Windows were liars. They showed you the world outside. They promised freedom. But it was always a trick. She sat down and turned her back to the glass. Memories scratched at the back of her mind. The attic. The hunger. The time she had found a window unlatched. She had jumped. She had tasted fresh air for 3 seconds before he dragged her back inside. The punishment for that escape attempt had lasted a week. Dark. Cold. No bathroom. Just leftovers thrown on the floor like she was a dog. She clenched her fists. Her brother had escaped. He got out. He left her behind to rot with the monster. You okay? Miriam whispered. Hadassah jerked out of the memory. She nodded quickly and opened her book. She needed to disappear. 45 minutes later, the bell screamed. Hadassah was the first one out of her seat. She didn't look at Miriam. She didn't look at the boy with the dark eyes. She just needed to get to her locker. The hallway was a river of noise and bodies. Hadassah kept her hood up. She navigated the crowd with practiced ease. She reached her locker and fumbled with the combination. Biology book. Notebook. Pen. She swapped her supplies and slammed the metal door shut. The boy from class leaned against the lockers right next to her. Hey. His voice was deep. Smooth. Hadassah didn't look up. She turned on her heel and walked away. Talking to him was a death sentence. For her. Maybe for him. She couldn't risk it. He fell into step beside her. I am kind of talking to you, he said. He sounded amused. Hadassah pulled her hood down further. The fabric cast a shadow over her bruised cheekbone. Leave me alone, she whispered. She picked up the pace. She dodged a group of seniors and ducked into her next classroom. She didn't stop moving until she was in the back corner. He didn't follow her in. The rest of the morning blurred into a gray haze of lectures and bell rings. Then came the worst part of the day. Lunch. Hadassah tried to cross the cafeteria unnoticed. She aimed for a table in the far corner near the trash cans. No one sat there. Look who we have here. The voice was high and sharp. Hadassah stopped. 3 pairs of red heels stepped into her path. The tiny, hideous new girl, the leader said. She had perfect hair and a cruel mouth. Delilah, I think she is ignoring us. Disrespectful, one of the sidekicks muttered. Her name tag said Zilla. I think she needs to learn some manners, Delilah said. She stepped closer. Take off the hood, you little rat. Hadassah gripped the edges of her sweatshirt. No. You won't do it? Delilah sneered. Then let me help you. Hands grabbed Hadassah. She gasped. She tried to pull away, but they were stronger than they looked. One girl yanked her left arm. Zilla grabbed her right. No. Stop. Hadassah cried out. Delilah reached forward. She grabbed the fabric of the hood and ripped it back. The cafeteria went silent. The fluorescent lights hit Hadassah's face. There was nowhere to hide. The purple bruise on her cheek. The split lip. The fading yellow marks on her neck. Gasps rippled through the room. Delilah took a step back, her eyes wide. Hadassah trembled. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Back off, Delilah. The voice was low. Dangerous. Hadassah froze. She knew that voice. The boy from biology class stepped between her and the girls. He towered over Delilah. His hands were curled into fists at his sides. "Get lost," he growled. Delilah didn't argue. The click-clack of red heels retreated instantly. Hadassah stared at the floor. She couldn't breathe. He had seen. Adarion had seen. "Hey." The boy's voice changed. The anger evaporated, replaced by something softer. He turned to face her. "What happened to your face?" Hadassah squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't tell anyone. She yanked her hood back up. "Don't," she choked out. She shoved past him and ran. She sprinted down the hallway, ignoring the teachers yelling at her to slow down. She burst through the double doors and out into the schoolyard. The cold air hit her lungs. She slowed to a walk, her chest heaving. The school day was almost over. That meant only one thing. She had to go back to the house. She had to go back to the man who made the bruises. To the smell of stale alcohol and the heavy sound of boots on the stairs. To the lock on the door and the fear that never slept. Hadassah looked at the front gate. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Please," she whispered to the empty air. "Let me survive tonight. You are going to crack your skull open." Boaz stopped thumping his forehead against the solid mahogany desk. He kept his head down and stared at the wood grain. The rhythmic dull thud was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Maybe that is the point," Boaz mumbled against the desk. "If I give myself a concussion, then maybe I will stop thinking about it." "You are frustrated," Gideon said. Boaz lifted his head and glared at his best friend. Gideon leaned against the bedroom door frame with a smirk. It was easy for him to smile. Gideon found his mate at Boaz's 16th birthday party. "I am not just frustrated," Boaz said. He stood up and paced the length of his room. "I am going crazy. Adarion has found theirs. You found Sarai. Caleb found Peninnah. Aden, my little sister, found her guy and moved to England." He ran a hand through his dark hair. The silence in his head was louder than the noise. "Maybe she is extinct," Boaz said. "Like a dinosaur. Maybe she does not exist." "Dude," Gideon laughed. "You sound dramatic." "Or maybe some monster is keeping her from me," Boaz continued. The thought made his chest tighten. "Or she is not born yet. Or she will take one look at me and run the other way." "She is out there," Gideon said. He checked his watch. "She is somewhere in this world waiting for her Prince Charming. But right now Prince Charming needs to move his butt. We have school." Boaz growled low in his throat. "I am your alpha. Watch your tone." "Sure. Yeah. You are my alpha." Gideon pushed off the door frame. "But I am your best friend. And we are going to be late." Boaz sighed. He was the alpha of the Judah pack. His father gave him the title the day he turned 18. They were the most feared pack in the region. He was tough on everyone. He trained the younger wolves until they dropped. But this one empty space in his life made him feel weak. "Be patient," Ari whispered in his mind. Boaz rolled his eyes. Ari was his wolf. Ari was usually calm while Boaz was a storm. "It has been 2 months since our birthday," Boaz thought back. "I am tired of waiting." "Good things take time," Ari replied. The wolf sounded bored. "Now go to school." Boaz grabbed his leather jacket. He hated interruptions, but he let Gideon slide. If any other pack member spoke to him that way, he would put them on the ground. But Gideon was different. They walked out to the driveway. The morning air was crisp. Boaz mounted his black motorcycle. The engine roared to life beneath him. It was the only sound he liked more than silence. He followed Gideon to Gilgal High. The parking lot was already full of students. Boaz killed the engine and kicked the stand down. The smells hit him instantly. Cheap body spray. Stale coffee. Fear. Hormones. He pulled off his helmet. Gideon was already waiting with Sarai. Caleb stood by his own bike with Peninnah. Ready for another day of torture? Caleb asked. Boaz ignored him. He walked toward the school entrance. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. He felt the eyes on him. Girls whispered behind their hands. She-wolves stared with hungry eyes. He kept his gaze forward. He did not care about them. He was saving everything for her. Whoever she was. The first bell rang. We have history with Ezra, Caleb said. He fell into step beside Boaz. Boaz groaned. Great. They entered the classroom. Boaz walked to his usual desk in the center of the room. Mr. Ezra was already at the board. He started talking about the Civil War before everyone sat down. Boaz slumped in his chair. He tapped his pen against the desk. The lecture turned into a blur of noise. Then it hit him. A scent drifted through the open door. Boaz froze. His pen stopped tapping. He inhaled sharply. It smelled like wood and wildflowers. It was sweet and earthy and powerful. It cut through the smell of chalk and sweat. Mate, Ari roared. The wolf woke up instantly. Ari paced inside Boaz's mind. He clawed at the mental walls. She is here, Ari shouted. Find her. Boaz gripped the edge of his desk. His knuckles turned white. The scent grew stronger. It was getting closer. Footsteps stopped outside the door. A small hand pushed it open. A girl walked in. Boaz could not breathe. She wore an oversized hoodie that swallowed her frame. Her hood was up and cast a shadow over her face. He could not see her features clearly. But his soul knew her. Mr. Ezra stopped writing. He turned around. Ah, the teacher said. You must be the new student. Hadassah? Boaz tested the name in his head. Hadassah. It sounded like a melody. The girl nodded once. She did not speak. She kept her head down. Take a seat, Mr. Ezra said. He pointed to the back. The desk next to Miriam is empty. Boaz clenched his jaw. Miriam was Caleb's sister. She was loud and annoying. He hated that she got to sit next to his mate. Hadassah walked down the aisle. She moved quickly. She clutched her backpack to her chest like a shield. As she passed him, the scent overwhelmed him. It was intoxicating. Boaz turned in his seat to watch her. She sat down and immediately pulled a notebook out. She did not look at anyone. The next 40 minutes were agony. Boaz did not hear a word Mr. Ezra said. He stared at the back of her head. He wanted to rip the hood down. He wanted to see her eyes. Go to her, Ari urged. Not yet, Boaz thought. She looked scared. The bell finally rang. Hadassah was the first one out of her seat. She bolted for the door. Wait. Boaz called out. She did not stop. She disappeared into the crowded hallway. Boaz shoved his books into his bag and ran after her. He spotted her gray hoodie near the lockers. He pushed past a group of freshmen. Hey, Boaz said. He reached out but did not touch her. Hadassah? She stiffened. She slammed her locker shut and turned away. She walked fast. She acted like she did not hear him. Boaz stood there in the middle of the hallway. He felt like a fool. Man, Gideon said from behind him. A heavy hand landed on Boaz's shoulder. Tell me why you are smiling like that. You look creepy. Boaz blinked. He realized he was grinning. I found her, Boaz whispered. Gideon's eyes went wide. Who? My mate, Boaz said. The rest of the morning dragged. Boaz moved through his classes on autopilot. He kept checking every corner for that gray hoodie. The lunch bell rang. Boaz walked to the cafeteria with his friends. Suddenly a wave of cold dread washed over him. His heart hammered against his ribs. "What is wrong?" Caleb asked. "Something is wrong," Boaz said. He rubbed his chest. "I feel sad. Scared." "It is not you," Ari growled. "It is her." Boaz's eyes snapped up. He followed the invisible thread of fear. He followed the scent of wildflowers. He burst into the cafeteria. His eyes scanned the room. There. Hadassah stood near the trash cans. Delilah and her group of minions had her cornered. Delilah was the pack's biggest troublemaker. She had been trying to get into Boaz's bed for years. Delilah laughed and shoved Hadassah's shoulder. Hadassah stumbled back. A red haze clouded Boaz's vision. "Back off." Boaz roared. The cafeteria went silent. The chatter stopped. Adari head turned toward him. Boaz stormed across the room. His voice dropped to a lethal growl. "Back off, Delilah." Delilah jumped. Her face went pale. She looked from Boaz to Hadassah. She signaled her friends and they scrambled away to a distant table. Boaz did not look at them. He turned his attention to the girl in the gray hoodie. She was trembling. She stared at the floor. "Are you okay?" Boaz asked softly. He took a step closer. Hadassah flinched. The movement caused her hood to slip back just an inch. Boaz froze. There was a dark purple bruise on her cheekbone. A fresh cut ran along her jawline. Rage exploded in Boaz's chest. It was hot and violent. Someone touched what belonged to him. Someone hurt her. "What happened to your face?" Boaz demanded. He reached for her chin to get a better look. Hadassah gasped. She yanked her hood back down. She dodged his hand and sprinted toward the exit. She pushed through the double doors and vanished. Boaz stood alone in the silence. His hands shook with the need to destroy something. He narrowed his eyes. He opened the mind link to his beta. "Caleb," Boaz projected his voice. It was cold and sharp as a blade. "I want a full investigation on the new girl. Find out who she is and where she came from." "On it, Alpha," Caleb replied instantly. Boaz stared at the doors where she disappeared. "And Caleb?" Boaz added. "Find out exactly who dared to put a hand on my mate. You and me against the world, Hadassah. I promise." The memory of Reuben's voice echoed in her head. It bounced around her skull like a marble in an empty tin can. It was a lie. A beautiful, cruel lie. Hadassah didn't look back at the school gates. She kept her head down. She pulled the hood of her oversized sweatshirt low over her forehead. The fabric scratched against the fresh bruises on her cheek, but she didn't care. She just needed to move. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement. The rhythm was erratic. Fast. Panic-stricken. She had to get away from him. Not her father. Not yet. She was running from the guy at school. The one who had seen her. Earlier that day, the wind had played a sick joke on her. It blew her hair back. Just for a second. But a second was long enough. That guy had been standing right there. He saw the purple welt on her jaw. He saw the cut on her lip. Hadassah expected disgust. She was used to disgust. People usually looked at her like she was a walking contagion. But he didn't look disgusted. He looked pained. His eyes had gone soft and sad. It was pity. Pure, unfiltered pity. That was worse. Anger boiled in her gut. It mixed with the shame until she felt sick. She hated that look. She didn't want his sympathy. She didn't want him to know that she was broken. She was a ghost walking through the halls, and ghosts weren't supposed to have bruises. She turned the corner onto the long road leading to her neighborhood. Her breathing was ragged. She slowed down to a walk. Her lungs burned. Why did you leave me, Reuben? The thought came unbidden. It always did when she was scared. She remembered the rubber ducks in the bathtub. She remembered splashing water until the floor was soaked. Mum would laugh. Reuben would laugh. She was 8 years old when the laughter stopped. Mum left first. Then the stranger moved in. Her father. The man who was supposed to protect them but turned into a monster instead. Then Reuben left. He left a letter on her pillow. Just a piece of paper. He said the violence was too much. He said the house was suffocating him. He promised to get help. He promised to come back for her. Hadassah kicked a loose stone on the sidewalk. It skittered into the gutter. He never came back. It had been years. Years of silence. Years of wondering if she was just a burden. Maybe she was the mistake the monster said she was. Maybe Reuben was glad to be rid of her. If she was worth saving, he would be here. He would be walking beside her. He would stand between her and the fists waiting at home. She stopped walking. The cold wind bit at her exposed fingers. Tears pricked her eyes. She wiped them away aggressively. Crying was dangerous. Crying made her eyes puffy. Puffy eyes meant questions. Questions meant punishment. She checked the cheap plastic watch on her wrist. The blood drained from her face. She was late. Panic replaced the sadness instantly. Being late was a sin. Being late meant he had been waiting. It meant the anger had been building up, pressure in a pipe waiting to burst. She forced her legs to move faster. Her chest felt tight. She tried to imagine a different life. A life where she could walk through the front door and smell dinner cooking. A life where someone asked, "How was your day?" instead of throwing a bottle. But she couldn't imagine it. The images wouldn't come. All she could see was the peeling paint on her front door. She reached the house. It loomed over the street like a tombstone. The windows were dark. That was never a good sign. Hadassah stood on the porch. She shivered. It wasn't from the cold. She reached for the doorknob. Her hand trembled. She took a deep breath and prayed he wasn't there. Maybe he passed out. Maybe he went to the bar. She pushed the door open. She stepped inside and toed off her worn-out Converse shoes. She tried to be silent. She tried to be invisible. Whack. The impact was sudden. It exploded against the side of her face. Hadassah stumbled back. Her shoulder slammed into the wall. The hallway spun. She tasted copper in her mouth. Her lip had split open again. "Look at the time," a voice growled. It was him. The monster. He stood in the shadows of the living room. He smelled like stale beer and rage. "I asked you a question," he shouted. "Why are you late?" Hadassah didn't answer. Answers were fuel. Silence was safer. She curled her shoulders in, making herself small. He stepped forward. He grabbed a fistful of her hair. He yanked her head back. She let out a small gasp, but she didn't scream. Screaming made him enjoy it more. "Useless," he spat. He shoved her. She flew across the room. She hit the floor hard. The cold tiles bit into her skin. Then came the kicks. 1. It hit her stomach. The air left her lungs in a rush. She couldn't breathe. 2. It hit her thigh. A sharp, stinging pain. 3. She lost count after that. She curled into a ball. She protected her head with her arms. She squeezed her eyes shut and waited. She waited for the darkness. She waited for it to be over. Something cracked in her side. A rib. It had to be. The pain was sharp and white-hot. He stopped. Heavy breathing filled the room. He stood over her for a moment longer. She could feel his glare burning into her skin. Then he turned away. He walked back toward the kitchen, muttering to himself. Hadassah stayed on the floor. She waited until she heard the refrigerator door open. She waited until the cap of a bottle hissed. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. Her side screamed in protest. Her vision was blurry. Tears mixed with the dirt on her face. She limped toward the bathroom. She locked the door. The lock was flimsy, but it was the only barrier she had. She turned on the faucet. The water ran cold. She stared into the mirror. The face looking back was a ruin. One eye was already swelling shut. Her lip was bleeding. A bruise was blooming on her cheekbone like a dark flower. She looked like a victim. She hated it. She stripped off her clothes. Every movement hurt. She stepped into the shower. She didn't turn on the hot water. She let the freezing spray hit her skin. She needed to feel numb. The cold water washed the blood down the drain. It swirled red against the white porcelain. She stared at her wrists. The pale skin. The veins underneath. The urge rose up in her chest. It was a dark, heavy wave. She wanted to hurt herself. She wanted to control the pain. If she made the pain, then it belonged to her. It didn't belong to him. She reached for the washcloth instead. She scrubbed her skin. She scrubbed until it was raw and red. She scrubbed until the sensation of the water overpowered the throbbing in her ribs. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to dissolve into the water and go down the drain. Reuben wasn't coming back. Mum wasn't coming back. There was no rescue. There was only the cold house and the cold floor. She turned off the water. She dried herself with a rough towel. She put on her pajamas. They were old and soft. They were the only comfort she had. She crawled into bed. She pulled the covers up to her chin. The darkness of the room pressed in on her. "Just let me sleep," she whispered to the empty air. "Please, just let me sleep forever." "Caleb, tell me you have something useful," Boaz said, his voice dropping to a low growl as his beta stepped into the office. Boaz didn't turn away from the floor-to-ceiling window. He watched the pups playing in the fields below, shifting between 2 legs and 4. Their joy felt 1,000 miles away. All he could smell was the faint, lingering scent of lilies and copper, the scent of his mate, Hadassah, and the blood from the bruises on her face. Caleb set a thin yellow folder on the marble desk. "I have the basics, Alpha." But the deeper I dug, the more the trail went cold. Boaz turned, his eyes flashing a brief, predatory gold. He didn't touch the file. He leaned back in his leather chair and gestured for Caleb to speak. "Read it." Addery word. Hadassah collision. 18 years old. Born August 4th, Caleb began, his tone professional but cautious. She lives in a small cabin out on the way of Shur with her father, a man named Nimrod Nixon. Her mother died of cancer when Hadassah was 8, but there are no records of a funeral or a burial site. Her brother vanished the same year. Boaz's grip tightened on the armrests of his chair. The wood groaned under his strength. "And the father? What do we have on him?" Caleb shook his head. "That is the problem. It is like the man does not exist. No employment history, no tax records, nothing. And Hadassah? She has never stayed at a single school for more than 3 months. They move constantly." "Because they are running," Boaz muttered. He stood up and paced the length of the office. His wolf, Ari, was pacing just as restlessly inside his mind. "Protect her," the wolf demanded. "She is marked by a coward. We must hunt." "I want eyes on that cabin," Boaz ordered. "Something is wrong. No human man leaves that many scars on my mate and gets away with it. Check the perimeter." Do not let her out of your sight. Understood, Alpha, Caleb said, bowing his head before slipping out of the room. Boaz needed air. He headed for the training clearing, his boots crunching on the gravel. He watched his warriors spar, but his mind was back in the school hallway, seeing the fear in Hadassah's eyes. He had waited his whole life to find his mate, to protect her with his very soul. Seeing her broken was a physical weight in his chest. Suddenly, the weight turned into a white-hot blade. Boaz stopped mid-stride. His lungs seized. He tried to draw a breath, but it felt like he was inhaling liquid fire. The world tilted. The green of the forest and the gray of the gravel blurred into a messy smudge of color. Alpha, a voice called out, sounding like it was underwater. Boaz hit his knees. The pain was blinding. It wasn't his own, it was an echo, a psychic scream ripping through the bond. Someone was hurting her. Right now. The agony was so sharp he couldn't even shift to howl. He felt his heart skip a beat, a cold sweat breaking across his skin, and then his vision went black. When he opened his eyes, he was staring at the sterile white ceiling of the pack clinic. I cannot find a single injury on him, a voice whispered nearby. It was Dr. David. It has to be the bond, Luna. He has not even claimed a mate yet, his mother, Elishaba, replied. Boaz could hear the tremor of fear in her voice. Mom, Boaz croaked. She was at his side in a second, her hand cold against his forehead. Boaz? Thank the moon. What happened? You just collapsed in the field. Boaz pushed himself up, ignoring the dull ache that still throbbed behind his ribs. The phantom pain was fading, leaving only a hollow sense of dread. I found her, Mom. Today. She is human. Elishabeth's eyes widened. Human? But the pain. David says you were reacting to a trauma that wasn't yours. She is being hurt, Boaz said, his voice vibrating with a lethal edge. He swung his legs off the bed, dismissing the doctor with a sharp look. And I am done watching from a distance. He didn't wait for her to argue. He stormed out of the clinic and headed straight for the large conference room in the main house. He didn't need to call them, he sent a sharp, urgent pulse through the mind link. Conference room. Now. Within minutes, his most trusted circle, Caleb, Gideon, Othniel, and Abner, were seated around the heavy oak table. The air in the room was thick with the Alpha's killing intent. You all know I found my mate, Boaz began, leaning over the table, his palms flat on the wood. Her name is Hadassah. And she is in danger. He looked at Othniel and Abner, the pack's most brutal fighters. You two are on the father. Nimrod Nixon. I want to know when he breathes, when he sleeps, and especially when he raises a hand. If he moves toward her aggressively, you stop him. Do not wait for my permission. He turned to Gideon and Caleb. You are her shadows. Follow her to school. Follow her home. If a single hair on her head is touched, I want heads on Pike's Addery Hour, I want a status report. No exceptions. Is she safe at the cabin tonight? Gideon asked. Boaz looked toward the window, the sun dipping below the horizon. The bond felt stretched, thin, and aching. No. But she will be soon. Go. Now. The men scrambled out, leaving Boaz alone in the quiet room. He touched his chest, right where the pain had been the sharpest. He could still feel her fear humming in his blood. I am coming for you, Hadassah, he whispered to the empty room. And God help anyone who stands in my way. Get over here right now, you brat, and don't make me ask twice. Hadassah froze at the foot of the stairs. The voice of the man she was forced to call a father echoed through the hallway like a whip crack. It was a familiar sound, one that usually preceded a heavy hand or a flying glass. She tightened her grip on the railing, her knuckles turning white against the wood. The bruises from yesterday were still blooming across her ribs in shades of angry purple and sickly yellow. She had learned the hard way that fighting back was a losing game. The first few times he had turned on her, she tried to push him away. She tried to scream. But a man that size didn't feel a teenager's frantic shoves. He only felt the sting of her resistance, and it made him hit harder. Now, Hadassah didn't fight. She just knew how to crouch. She knew how to make herself small, tucking her chin and protecting her vitals, waiting for the storm to pass. "I'm coming," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. She walked into the kitchen, her steps light and ghost-like. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The smell of the heavy roast she had prepared for him and his friends made her stomach twist with a sharp, hollow ache. She had doubled the portions today, sweating over the stove to make sure everything was exactly as he liked it. She didn't look at the men sitting around the table. She kept her hood pulled low over her messy hair and her eyes fixed on the scuffed floorboards. To them, she was just part of the furniture. That was fine by her. Attention was a dangerous thing in this house. "The table is set," she said, her voice barely a murmur. Her father didn't thank her. He didn't even acknowledge the work. He simply waved a hand toward the corner of the room. "Stay there. If someone needs a refill, you move. You don't speak unless spoken to." Hadassah retreated to the shadows by the refrigerator. She stood perfectly still, her back against the cold metal. Her mind drifted back to the school day, which felt like a lifetime ago. Walking to class had been a struggle. Every step sent a jolt of pain through her legs. The girls at school had been quiet for once, no ketchup packets thrown her way, no Skittles pelting her back in the cafeteria. It should have felt like a victory, but the silence only made room for him. Boaz. He had sat next to her in math class. She could feel the heat radiating off him, a strange, magnetic pull that terrified her. When he looked at her, she felt a frantic urge to reach out. To grab his hand. To feel something other than the cold isolation she had built around herself. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. She remembered Abel. She was 14 when she met him in Arizona. He was the only person who ever made her laugh. They used to sneak out to the park just to talk about nothing. He was an orphan, a boy the world had forgotten, but he was everything to her. Then her father found out. The memory played in her head like a grainy, horrific film. The flash of the knife. The sound of Abel's breath hitching. Her father's hand, slick with blood, gripping her hair as he dragged her to the backyard. He made her watch. He made her stand there while he dug a hole in the red dirt and rolled Abel's body into the earth. No one ever looked for him. No one ever asked why the quiet boy from the group home stopped showing up. That was the day Hadassah's voice died. That was the day she decided that being alone was the only way to keep people alive. "Hey, girl. I'm talking to you." One of the men at the table, a greasy guy with a stained shirt, was snapping his fingers at her. Hadassah snapped back to the present, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The beer is empty," the man barked. Hadassah moved quickly, grabbing a fresh bottle from the fridge and placing it at his elbow. She didn't look at his face. She didn't look at the way his eyes lingered on the hem of her oversized sweater. "Keep your head down," she told herself. "Just stay invisible." Her father grabbed her chin suddenly, his fingers digging into the soft skin of her jaw. He forced her head up, exposing her face to the light. The smell of stale whiskey and tobacco filled her senses. "Look at her," her father chuckled to his friends. "She's got that look in her eyes again. Like she's somewhere else." "Let go," she wanted to say, but the words stayed locked in her throat. He squeezed harder, his thumb pressing into a spot that would surely be blue by morning. "You think you're better than us? You think you're too good for this house?" "No," she managed to choke out. "Good. Because you've got nowhere else to go. No one is coming for you, Hadassah. Not your mother, not your coward brother. Just me." He shoved her back, and she stumbled, hitting her shoulder against the wall. The men laughed, a low, guttural sound that filled the room. Hadassah regained her balance, her face burning with shame and suppressed rage. She wanted to scream that she hated him. She wanted to tell him that she didn't choose this life, this body, or this planet. But she stayed silent. Silence was her armor. As the night wore on, the house grew louder. The men got drunker, their jokes getting cruder. Hadassah stayed in her corner, a ghost in her own home. She thought about the school locker, the math books, and the way Boaz had tried to catch her eye. He didn't know the danger he was in just by sitting near her. He didn't know that everyone she cared about ended up in the ground or gone. Finally, her father waved a dismissive hand. Get out of here. Go to your room. Hadassah didn't wait. She turned and bolted up the stairs, her heart racing. She reached her tiny bedroom, the white walls, the small bed in the corner, and locked the door. It wasn't much of a lock, but it was all she had. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her worn-out Converse sneakers. She thought about running. She thought about the highway that stretched out past the edge of town, leading to places where no one knew her name. But she knew she wouldn't go. She was broken, physically and mentally, tied to this house by a chain of fear she couldn't break. She laid down, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. The laughter from downstairs drifted through the floorboards. It was the soundtrack of her life. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine a place where the air didn't feel heavy. A place where she could breathe without checking the room for exits. A loud crash came from downstairs, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Hadassah jumped, her eyes flying open. She held her breath, listening. Hadassah, her father roared from the bottom of the steps. Come here right now, you bitch. See what I mean? The man's voice rasped through the room like sandpaper. He didn't look at Hadassah as a person. He looked at her like a piece of furniture he was done using. My friends are bored, he continued. He gestured toward the shadows of the living room where the others waited. Go in there and let them have you. They are guests, after all. Hadassah didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on the scuffed hardwood floor. The air in the room felt thick and oily. She knew the routine. She knew the pain was coming, but her feet felt like they were set in concrete. In the back of her mind, a face flickered. Boaz. He was the boy from school who actually tried to talk to her. He was the one person who looked at her like she mattered. It ached to think of him now. Why was he appearing in her head when her world was about to collapse? The man didn't wait for her to agree. He moved fast. His hand clamped around Hadassah's throat and slammed her against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs in a sharp wheeze. He didn't stop there. He threw her across the room. Her body hit the floor hard. Then came the boots and the fists. Hadassah closed her eyes. She let the darkness take her. Hey, Flo. The voice was soft. Familiar. Hadassah felt the sensation of cool grass beneath her palms. She groaned, pushing herself up from the ground. The hallway was gone. The man was gone. Who is there? Hadassah asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. She hadn't spoken in years. She had been silent for half her life, yet here, the words flowed. A giggle echoed through the trees. Flo. Who is there? Hadassah called out again. She turned in a circle, her heart racing with a strange kind of hope. I'm here, baby, the voice whispered from behind her. Hadassah spun around. A woman stood there. She had dark, soulful eyes and a smile that felt like sunlight. It was her mother. Mommy? Hadassah's voice broke. A sob pulled at her chest. Yeah, baby. It's me, her mother said. Hadassah leaped forward. She threw her arms around her mother in a crushing hug. She buried her face in the familiar scent of her hair. I miss you, Mommy. I miss you so much, Hadassah wailed. Then, the world froze. The wind died. The warmth in her mother's arms turned to ice. The green grass turned to ink. Hadassah felt herself falling into a deep, silent hole. When her eyes finally opened, the first thing she saw was a blinding white light. Her body felt heavy and numb. She tried to remember how she got here. There was a memory of a roar. A loud, animalistic sound that had ripped through the house right before everything went black. "I'm relieved you're awake," a woman's voice said. Hadassah flinched. She looked to her left and saw a woman in a white coat. She was smiling, but Hadassah didn't feel safe. Panic surged through her. Who is this? Where am I? Where is the man? The woman reached out and gently squeezed Hadassah's hand. "Everything will be okay. I'm going to go call the doctor." She walked out, leaving Hadassah alone with her thoughts. The memories rushed back like a flood. She remembered the man's friends. She remembered them pinning her down. Then, that roar and the sound of something crashing. Did someone save her? Was the man coming back for her? The door burst open. Hadassah jumped, pulling the thin hospital blanket up to her chin. Boaz stood in the doorway. He was out of breath. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were wide. You're awake," he panted. Hadassah's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands began to shake. She felt a strange mix of terror and peace. She wanted to run away because everyone was a threat, but a part of her wanted to pull him closer. Boaz stayed by the door. He seemed to sense her fear. "It's all right," he murmured softly. "I'm not going to get close anymore, okay?" Hadassah nodded slowly. She gripped the blanket so tight her knuckles turned white. Boaz pulled a plastic chair over and sat a few feet away. They sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't the scary kind of silence she was used to. It was quiet. The woman returned with a man in a lab coat. Boaz stood up, his eyes never leaving Hadassah. "How are you feeling, Hadassah?" the doctor asked. "Are you going to keep staring at that ceiling all day, or are you actually going to wake up?" Hadassah shifted her gaze toward the voice. Dr. Brittany stood by the hospital bed with a gentle smile, checking the monitors. Hadassah tried to sit up, but a sharp, stabbing pain in her side forced her back down. 2 weeks of sleep hadn't done much to dull the ache of 3 broken ribs. "Easy now," Brittany said, her voice soft and reassuring. "You've been through a lot. Your body needs time." Hadassah looked down at her hands. They were covered in fading bruises. A new, jagged scar sliced across her forehead, a permanent reminder of the night her world ended. She felt heavy, like her limbs were made of lead. "Who brought me here?" Hadassah whispered. Her throat felt like it was filled with sand. "And the bill? I don't have any money to pay for this." "Don't you worry about the money," Brittany replied, patting her hand. "Everything is taken care of. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt like a lie. Hadassah closed her eyes, but that only made it worse. Every time she blinked, she saw his face. Every time she drifted off, she felt the phantom touch of hands trying to tear her life away. She was terrified to fall asleep. She knew he was out there, waiting to finish what he started. Despite her fear, the exhaustion won. Her eyes grew heavy, and the hospital room faded into a dark, suffocating fog. A man stood at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. He wore a silky black coat that was far too long, dragging behind him on the floor like a shadow. A golfer's hat was tilted low over his brow. He turned toward her, and a slow, twisted smile spread across his face. Hadassah tried to move, but her feet were frozen. Her heart hammered against her bruised ribs. "Missed me?" the man asked. His tone was cheerful, mocking. He sat down on a velvet couch that appeared out of the darkness, crossing his legs comfortably. His face remained a blurry smudge, like a face seen through a rain-streaked window. "Do you even know who I am?" he asked. Hadassah shook her head. She tried to step back, but she stumbled, her legs shaking like jelly. "I'm your father, you bitch," he screamed. The blur vanished. The features snapped into focus, but they weren't human. His eyes were a deep, blood red, glowing with a manic intensity. The recognition hit Hadassah like a physical blow. It was him. He stood up and began to walk toward her. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. Hadassah tried to scream, but her voice was gone. She tried to run, but her legs were glued to the floor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a long, silver blade. In a flash of light, the cold steel buried itself in the center of her chest. The pain was white-hot, more than she could handle. Hadassah. The voice came from far away, echoing through the darkness. The ground beneath her began to shake. Hadassah, wake up. She jolted upright, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sweat soaked her hospital gown, and her heart felt like it was going to burst out of her chest. She panicked, swinging her arms wildly until she felt a pair of strong, warm arms wrap around her. For a second, she struggled. Then, a strange sensation washed over her. It was a wave of heat, a tingle that raced across her skin like electric sparks. It felt like comfort. It felt like home. She gripped the man's shirt, burying her face in his chest as she sobbed. "It's okay," he whispered, rocking her back and forth. "It was just a nightmare. I've got you." Hadassah didn't know who he was, but she knew the feeling. The darkness retreated. She let out a long, shuddering breath and blacked out again, finally feeling the weight of the danger lift. 2 weeks earlier, the woods were alive with the sound of snapping twigs and heavy breathing. Boaz pushed his pace, his paws digging into the soft earth. He had sent his best men to watch Hadassah's house, but his wolf was restless. He needed to run. Nearby, Hanoks was busy on the training mats, shouting orders at the newly shifted pups. Boaz didn't stop to watch. He stripped off his clothes in one fluid motion, letting the change take him. His bones popped and reshaped, his muscles stretching until he stood on 4 legs. His fur was a thick, dark gray, an anomaly among alphas, who almost always carried coats of pure black. Nobody knew why he was different, and right now, he didn't care. He leaped into the deep woods, the trees becoming a green blur. He loved the speed, the way the wind felt against his muzzle. Alpha. The voice of Abner exploded in his mind link, sharp and panicked. Boaz skidded to a halt, his claws tearing into the dirt. "Report," Boaz commanded, his mental voice a low growl. "It's the Luna's house." Abner screamed. "For men and her father, they're attacking her." Boaz's blood turned to ice. He spun around, his heart racing. He was miles away. Aden at full sprint, it would take minutes he didn't have. "They're trying to hurt her, Alpha. They're trying to strip her down." A blind, white-hot rage took over. Boaz didn't think, he just ran. Every muscle in his body burned as he pushed past his limits. "Get in that house." Boaz roared through the link, his mental voice shaking with fury. "Stop them. If they touch a hair on her head, I'll end them all." He tore through the underbrush, a gray streak of vengeance heading straight for the woman he hadn't even met yet, but already knew he would die to protect. "Hold on, Hadassah," he growled to himself. "I'm coming. Give me your shirt." Boaz did not look up. His eyes stayed locked on the small, broken form on the floor. His wolf thrashed under his skin. It snarled at the scent of the 4 dead men cooling on the floorboards. It snarled even louder at the thought of any other male scent touching what belonged to him. Othniel stripped the shirt from his back without a word and handed it over. Boaz draped the fabric over Hadassah. He tucked it around her shoulders as if he could shield her from the memory of this room. "Alpha, her father got away," Caleb said. The large wolf shifted back into his human form, his face tight with shame. "He slipped out the back. We couldn't catch him in the woods." Boaz lifted Hadassah into his arms. She felt like nothing. She was light, far too light, like a bird with broken wings. He walked past his men toward the exit. He did not look back at the carnage. Find him, Boaz said. His voice was a low, vibrating growl that made the air in the hallway feel heavy. You know his face now. Clean this mess. Burn the bodies. Leave nothing but ash. Yes, Alpha, Caleb replied. Boaz climbed into the back of the black pack van. He pulled Hadassah against his chest, cradling her head. Abner jumped into the driver's seat. Speed up, Boaz ordered. The van roared to life. Boaz stared down at Hadassah's face. Blood matted her hair. Bruises bloomed across her skin like dark flowers. He wondered what kind of man could do this. What kind of father looked at his own blood and chose to break it? The thought made his jaw ache. When he found the man, there would be no trial. There would only be the sound of a snapping neck. The van screeched to a halt at the pack infirmary. Boaz didn't wait for the door to be opened. He kicked it out and ran toward the entrance. Dr. Evans, he roared. The lobby went silent. Pack members scrambled out of his way. Dr. Evans appeared at the end of the hall, her eyes wide as she saw the Alpha's blood-stained clothes. Follow me, she said. She led him into a private wing reserved for high-ranking members. Boaz laid Hadassah on the white sheets. Nurses swarmed the bed. They moved with a speed that made his head spin. One nurse reached for Hadassah's arm, and Boaz's wolf lunged forward. A low growl ripped from his throat. Alpha Boaz, you have to wait outside, Dr. Evans said. She stepped between him and the bed. We need space to work. You are making the nurses nervous. He hesitated. Addery instinct told him to stay. His wolf wanted to pace the room and snap at anyone who touched her. But he saw the fear in the nurses' eyes. If they were afraid, they might make a mistake. Fine, he snapped. He paced the hallway for 3 hours. The linoleum floor felt the heat of his bare feet. Caleb, Gideon, Othniel, and Abner stood like statues against the wall. Go home, Boaz told them. Rest. We aren't leaving, Alpha, Othniel said. She is our Luna. We stay until we know she is safe. A soft footstep sounded at the end of the hall. Boaz looked up to see his mother. Her face was pale, her eyes full of the kind of worry only a parent could carry. Boaz, she whispered, sitting on the plastic chair next to him. They told me you were here with a girl. My mate, Boaz said. His voice cracked. He hated the sound of it. He was an alpha. He was supposed to be the wall that never broke. How is she? His mother asked. She placed a hand on his trembling shoulder. What happened to her? Her father, Boaz growled. The anger came back, hot and sharp. He laid hands on her. He let others do the same. The door to the room finally opened. A young doctor named Brittany stepped out, pulling off her surgical mask. Boaz was on his feet before she could speak. Is she okay? His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped animal. She needed dozens of stitches, Brittany said. She looked at her clipboard, then back at him. Her forehead, her legs, her arms. We stopped the bleeding, but she lost a lot. There are bruises, Boaz. Some are fresh. Some are months old. There are scars, too. Boaz's breath hitched. The physical wounds will heal in a few weeks, the doctor continued. But her mind, she has been abused for a long time. She might not wake up for a while. Her body is trying to hide from the pain. The world tilted. The anger he had been holding back exploded. Boaz didn't have time to fight it. His bones snapped and reshaped. In a heartbeat, a massive gray wolf stood where the man had been. He snapped his jaws at the air, his fur bristling with lethal intent. Ari, calm down, his mother cried out. She used his birth name, the one only she used. She is going to be okay. You have to be calm for her. She reached out, scratching the thick fur behind the wolf's ears. The touch grounded him. The wolf lowered its head, whining low in its throat. Boaz forced the shift back. It hurt, but he didn't care. Abner tossed him a pair of sweatpants from a gym bag. How long? Boaz asked, his voice raw. How long until she wakes up? 2 weeks. Maybe more, Brittany said. Boaz didn't leave her side for 14 days. He sat in the hard plastic chair. He watched the rise and fall of her chest. He didn't eat. He barely drank. He only left the room to use the washroom. On the 15th day, his mother walked in. She looked at the dark circles under his eyes. Go run, she commanded. You smell like a hospital. You need to clear your head so you can be a leader when she opens her eyes. I will sit with her. Boaz looked at Hadassah. She looked peaceful, but her skin was still too pale. He nodded slowly. He grabbed his sweatpants and headed for the woods behind the clinic. He shifted into his wolf form and ran. He pushed his muscles until they burned. He jumped over fallen logs and raced the wind, trying to outrun the guilt of not finding her sooner. Boaz. His mother's voice rang through the mind link. It was sharp and urgent. Yes? He replied, skidding to a halt in a clearing. He waited, his heart jumping into his throat. Your mate, his mother's voice echoed in his mind. She's awake. Wait, where am I? The question died in Hadassah's throat before it could even form. She sat up abruptly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The bed was soft, far too soft. It felt like a cloud, a sharp contrast to the cold, hard surfaces she was used to. She looked around the room. The walls were a gentle powder blue, lined with shelves of trophies and framed photos of a large, smiling family. A massive black screen hung on the wall opposite her. She threw the covers back and swung her legs over the side. A chill hit her skin, making her shiver. She looked down and froze. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and baggy sweatpants that weren't hers. Her blood turned to ice. Someone had changed her clothes. Someone had seen the marks. The jagged lines and faded bruises that mapped out her life of pain were no longer a secret. He's going to kill me, she whispered to the empty room. The memory of his voice hissed in her ears. He had promised that if anyone ever found out, he would end her. He said he would never let her go. If she stayed here, he wouldn't just hurt her, he would hurt whoever lived in this house. She couldn't let that happen. Hadassah ignored the sharp ache in her muscles and the soreness that flared with every movement. She scrambled toward the door and flung it open. The hallway was long and grand, but she didn't stop to look at the decor. She ran. Her bare feet slapped against the floor as she found the stairs and took them 2 at a time, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Voices drifted up from the floor below. They were deep and muffled, but they sounded like a threat to her panicked mind. She rounded the corner at the bottom of the stairs and slammed directly into a solid wall of muscle. Whoa. Who are you? The voice was rough and masculine. Hadassah looked up, her eyes wide. A man stood there, looking to be in his early 20s. He reached out to steady her, but his touch sent a jolt of pure electricity through her system. The world began to tilt. The floor felt like it was shifting into a liquid state. Hadassah's vision blurred at the edges, turning into a kaleidoscope of dark, jagged shapes. Her stomach did a violent flip, and the air in the room suddenly felt too thin to breathe. She felt herself dropping. Her knees hit the floor, but she barely felt the impact. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. Each breath was sharp, shallow, and useless. You're dying, a dark thought whispered in her mind. This is it. You're going to die right here on this floor, all alone. The muffled voices grew louder. She felt her entire body begin to shake with a violent tremor. Then, warm hands settled on her shoulders. They weren't rough. They didn't hurt. A strange tingling sensation spread from where he touched her, dulling the edge of the panic. Hadassah? She forced her eyes open. Two warm, brown eyes were staring into hers, filled with a level of concern she didn't recognize. The man, Boaz, was there. He didn't look angry. He didn't look like a monster. Hadassah leaned into his warmth instinctively. She felt him shift, lifting her easily into his arms. She didn't fight him. She didn't have the strength left to run. As he carried her back through the house, a sense of safety she had never known began to settle over her. He laid her back down on the soft mattress and pulled the duvet up to her chin. "It's okay," Boaz said, his voice dropping to a low, soothing hum. "You're okay now." Hadassah stared at him, her eyes searching his face. There was a comfort in his presence that felt like a shield against the rest of the world. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her closely. "Can you talk to me?" he asked. Hadassah felt a lump form in her throat. She slowly raised a hand and pointed to her neck, then shook her head. She watched his expression, waiting for the confusion or the inevitable annoyance. "You're mute?" Boaz asked. Hadassah nodded quickly. She was stunned. For years, people had yelled at her or called her stupid when she didn't speak. He had understood her in seconds. Boaz stood up without another word and walked out of the room. Hadassah watched him go, her heart sinking into her stomach. The warmth he had provided evaporated instantly. Of course he was leaving. Why would he want to deal with someone who couldn't even say thank you? Why would he want a girl covered in scars who couldn't make a sound? Hot tears began to spill over her cheeks, stinging her skin. She curled into a ball, waiting for him to come back and tell her to leave. A moment later, the door pushed open. Boaz stepped back inside, but he wasn't empty-handed. He held a spiral notebook and a black pen. He sat back down on the bed and frowned when he saw her face. "Why are you crying?" he asked. His eyes softened as he held out the notebook. "What's wrong?" "Write down whatever you want to say." "I'm listening." Hadassah took the pen with trembling fingers. Her handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. "You want me to leave because I can't talk, right?" She turned the notebook toward him. Boaz's eyes scanned the page, and his face instantly hardened. "No." He said it so loudly that Hadassah jumped, her eyes darting to the door. I'm sorry," Boaz said quickly, lowering his voice. "I didn't mean to shout." "Look, you remember me, right?" Hadassah nodded slowly. "I want you to know something," Boaz said, leaning in. "I've wanted to get to know you from the very start. I'm interested in you. I like you, Hadassah. I want you here. More than you know." Hadassah stared at him, her mouth parted in shock. He was perfect. He had a family, a home, and a life that didn't involve hiding in the dark. How could someone like him want someone like her? But as she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a lie. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't just a burden to be hidden away. She looked down at the notebook, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him, but the shadows of her past were still screaming that this was too good to be true. "Why would you want to stay with someone like me?" "You don't have to hide in here forever," Boaz said, his voice barely a whisper as he stepped into the room. Hadassah jumped, her eyes widening as she clutched the notebook against her chest. She hadn't heard the door open. Since arriving at the Fetcher estate, the quiet of the guest room had been her only sanctuary. Add the rich, savory sense of the meals Boaz's mother brought up felt overwhelming. Her stomach usually rebelled, allowing only thin soups and tea to stay down. She looked at him for a long moment before clicking her pen. She scribbled a few words and turned the notebook around. "What do you want?" Boaz rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I was wondering if you wanted to come downstairs for dinner. I think you're getting bored being alone in this room. But it's okay if you aren't ready." Hadassah bit her lip. She felt a strange pull toward him, a desire to ease the tension in his shoulders, but fear held her back. She began to write again, her hand shaking slightly. "I don't know. Won't the others feel uncomfortable?" I'm a stranger here. Boaz stepped closer, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. Listen to me. You aren't a stranger. You're family, and you belong here. He said it with such conviction that Hadassah found herself nodding. She pulled the blankets back and tried to stand, but her legs felt like lead. As she began to wobble, a pair of strong, warm arms caught her before she could hit the floor. Boaz lifted her effortlessly. A small, beautiful smile broke across his face, and Hadassah felt her heart throb painfully against her ribs. She gestured toward the bed, and he leaned over so she could grab her notebook before he carried her toward the door. Just a warning, Boaz muttered as they reached the hallway. My family is a little bit crazy. He walked through the massive house, which felt more like a palace than a home. High ceilings and polished floors blurred past until they stopped in front of two giant oak doors. Hushed voices drifted from the other side. Ready? Boaz asked. Hadassah took a deep breath and nodded. As the doors swung open, the room fell silent. Hadassah's heart raced, the rhythm drumming in her ears. A long table stretched across the dining hall, occupied by Boaz's parents, two younger brothers, and several other couples. Boaz didn't set her down until they reached the end of the table. He placed her gently in a chair and took the seat right next to her, his presence a solid anchor in the sea of staring faces. It's nice to see you here with us, Hadassah, a tall, broad-shouldered man said. I'm Amram Fetcher, Boaz's father. One by one, the others introduced themselves. There was Aaron, the uncle, Manasseh, the youngest brother, and a string of family friends like Gideon and Caleb. Hadassah felt the weight of their eyes, but the warmth in the room was hard to ignore. The evening progressed better than she expected. While she couldn't speak, she used her notebook to communicate with Boaz's mother and a young girl named Tirzah. They didn't treat her like an invalid or an outsider, they treated her like a guest of honor. Beside her, Boaz remained silent, but she could feel his focus entirely on her. He watched her every movement, his hand occasionally brushing against hers on the table. Inside Boaz's mind, a different conversation was happening. Why not tell her now? The voice of his inner instinct, Ari, growled. She needs to get used to us first, Boaz shot back silently. I don't want to scare her away with the truth. If you don't tell her before the lunar cycle, I'm taking control, the voice warned. I won't let her go unmarked. You're crazy, Boaz thought, feeling the familiar itch of the transformation under his skin. You won't do anything. I'm not crazier than you are, the voice retorted before fading into a low whimper. Boaz pushed the intrusive thoughts aside and focused on the girl beside him. He noticed her eyelids drooping as the dessert plates were cleared. The stress of the day had clearly taken its toll. He stood up, excusing them both from the table. The family offered warm goodbyes as he lifted Hadassah once more. By the time they reached the top of the stairs, her head was lolling against his shoulder. He carried her into the guest room and tucked her under the soft duvet. She was asleep the second her head hit the pillow. He stood by the bed for a moment, watching the moonlight play across her face. The clock was ticking. The lunar cycle was approaching, and the secret he was keeping was becoming a physical weight in his chest. Boaz leaned down, his voice a low growl that Hadassah was too deep in sleep to hear. You have no idea what's coming, do you? Shoo, it is okay now. I am here. Boaz's voice was a low anchor in the dark room. Hadassah pulled herself upright, her chest heaving as the remnants of the nightmare clawed at her mind. In the dream, she had been back on that cold floor. Her father had been there, laughing, flanked by those same strange, hulking men with the predatory eyes. The smell of stale beer and old cigarettes had felt so real. She looked at Boaz. He didn't look like a monster. He looked worried. His hand stayed on her shoulder just long enough to ground her before he pulled back. You were screaming in your sleep, he said softly. Hadassah reached for her throat, then remembered. She grabbed her notebook from the nightstand, but her hands were shaking too much to write. She simply nodded. I have the bath ready for you, Boaz said, gesturing toward the ensuite. Take your time. I will leave some clothes on the bed. Hadassah climbed out of the blankets and slipped into the bathroom. She let the hot water drown out the world for over an hour. The steam cleared her head, but it couldn't wash away the memory of Boaz's mother from the night before. The woman had been so kind. She had a way of looking at Hadassah that made her heart ache for her own mother. It was a good ache, but it was heavy. When she finally stepped back into the bedroom, a pair of black leggings and a massive, soft gray hoodie were waiting for her. She pulled them on. The hoodie smelled like pine and rain, like Boaz. She sat on the edge of the bed, picking at a loose thread. Fear started to settle in again. It wasn't just about the nightmare. She thought about her classes. She thought about the tuition her father definitely hadn't paid. Most of all, she thought about the walk to the campus. If she went out there, she was a target. And if Boaz was with her, he was a target too. Her father's friends weren't just bullies. They were something else. Something dangerous. The door creaked open. Boaz walked in wearing faded jeans and a plain white shirt. He looked like a normal guy, but there was a tension in his jaw that said otherwise. He sat on the bed next to her, leaving a respectful gap between them. "Are you feeling better now?" he asked. He gave her a small smile, and the sight of his dimples made her stomach do a nervous flip. Hadassah opened her notebook and wrote quickly. "Yes. But can I ask you something?" "Ask away," he said. "I am ready to answer anything." She turned to a fresh page. "Can I go to school today?" Boaz's smile vanished. He stared at the words for a long time before looking up. "Look, I do not think it is a good time," he said. His voice was firm but not mean. "Your father is still out there. We don't know where he is staying or who he is with." Hadassah felt the sting of disappointment. She looked down at her lap. Her education was the only way out of the life she had lived. If she stopped going, she lost everything. Boaz must have seen the look on her face because he shifted closer. "I am not saying never, Hadassah. Give it a few days. Stay here. Hang out with my mom. We need to figure out a plan to keep you safe first. Okay?" Hadassah bit her lip. She hated being a burden, but she knew he was right. She wrote back. "Okay. But soon. I have missed a lot of work." "Soon," he promised. He stood up and offered his hand to help her up. "Besides, my 2 little brothers have been bugging me since last night. They want to play. I think they like you." They walked downstairs together. The house was loud and full of life. The kitchen smelled like bacon and toasted bread. Boaz's brothers were already at the table, making a mess and laughing. For the first time in years, Hadassah didn't feel like she had to hide while she ate. She sat with them, feeling the warmth of a real family. But as Boaz grabbed his bag to head out with Caleb and Gideon, he paused at the door. He looked back at Hadassah, then at his mother. His eyes were dark, clouded with a sudden flash of worry. "Stay inside today," Boaz said, his voice dropping an octave. "I mean it. Don't go near the windows." Hadassah nodded, but the way he said it made her skin prickle. Boaz walked out to the truck, his brothers piling in behind him. As he climbed into the driver's seat, his grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He felt a strange, humming anxiety in his chest. It was a silent, nagging pressure, like the air before a lightning strike. "You okay, Gray?" Gideon asked from the back seat. "I'm fine," Boaz lied. He checked his mirrors, his eyes scanning the tree line around the house. The pack patrols were out there, he knew that. They were the best at what they did. But the silence in his own head, the weird, heavy stillness of his inner instincts, bothered him more than any noise could. He pulled out of the driveway, his eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, or that the peace of the morning was about to break. He arrived at the school parking lot and cut the engine. He didn't get out right away. He just sat there, staring at the brick building. Something is going to happen today, Boaz whispered to the empty air. Are you even listening to a word the teacher is saying? Caleb whispered. Boaz didn't look up from his desk. He kept his eyes fixed on the clock above the whiteboard. Math isn't exactly a priority today, Caleb. Just let me get through the hour. The classroom felt stifling. Usually, the school day followed a predictable rhythm. The pack members sat in the back rows, acting as a silent wall of protection. Everything looked perfect on the surface. No fights broke out in the halls. Hadassah seemed to be finding her place, growing closer to the Luna and the other brothers. She tried to smile as they walked through the quad earlier, but the expression never quite reached her eyes. Deep beneath the surface of the mundane school day, something ancient was stirring. For thousands of years, two souls had wandered through the realms. They had drifted over stones and through empty streets, never straying from each other's side. But today, a magnetic pull began to drag them apart. Two specific bodies on the physical plane acted like anchors. One body held a heart filled with gloom and hopelessness. The other held a heart fueled by worry and a fierce, protective love. The souls screamed as they were pulled toward these vessels. They couldn't stay apart for long without crumbling into nothing, yet the destiny of the realms required them to descend. Boaz gripped the edges of his wooden desk. The feeling of being watched by something invisible finally faded, but it was replaced by a localized heat. He looked around the room. A few students were slumped over their notebooks, fast asleep. Others were busy passing folded notes and stifling giggles. It was peaceful, yet the air felt thick and strange. Suddenly, a surge of raw power slammed into Boaz's chest. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Boaz? You're turning pale, Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave in concern. Boaz didn't answer. He couldn't. Sweat broke out across his forehead, and his lungs felt like they were shrinking. He gasped for air, his vision blurring as a searing heat ignited on his right wrist. It felt like a branding iron was being pressed into his flesh. Several pack members in the room stood up halfway, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor. They sensed the shift in the Alpha's energy. Boaz didn't wait for the teacher to check on him. He grabbed his backpack, shoved past a row of desks, and flung the classroom door open. He sprinted down the hallway, his boots thudding against the linoleum. Follow my scent, Boaz commanded through the mind link, his mental voice strained with pain. Caleb, only you. Stay back until I stop. He burst through the exit doors and hit the treeline at a full sprint. He expected his wolf to be frantic, howling at the intrusion of this new power. Instead, his inner wolf was eerily silent. It wasn't the silence of fear, but the silence of a subject bowing before a king. The burning on his wrist reached a fever pitch. Boaz collapsed to his knees in a clearing, his breath coming in ragged heaves. He pulled back his sleeve, staring in shock as black ink began to bloom under his skin. It didn't look like a tattoo, it looked like it was growing from his very bones. The pain vanished instantly. Boaz stared at his wrist. A jagged, black crown was now etched into his skin, sharp and permanent. He felt a hum of electricity beneath his skin that made his previous alpha power feel like a candle next to a bonfire. Alpha? Boaz turned his head. Caleb stood 20 feet away, frozen near a thick oak tree. The beta's face was white, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. What is it? Boaz asked. His voice sounded deeper, vibrating with a frequency that made the leaves on the trees tremble. Caleb swallowed hard, his knees buckling slightly. Your eyes, they aren't gold anymore, Boaz. They're different. And the power coming off you, my wolf won't even let me stand up straight. He wants to crawl on the dirt for you. While Boaz stood in the woods, the second soul found its mark. The young lady felt the same crushing weight of destiny, but she was miles away. The distance between the two souls was a physical agony that neither body could endure. The connection snapped. Boaz's world went black. He collapsed into the dirt, his consciousness slipping away from the forest and into a realm of gray mist and ancient whispers. He wasn't the only one. Across the distance, the girl fell as well. As their bodies lay cold on the ground, the ancient gears of the world began to turn. The shift was felt in the hidden corners of the earth. Witches in their covens looked toward the north and stood in unison. Sages woke from centuries of meditation with fire in their veins. Warlocks felt the sudden surge of the old laws returning. From the shadows of the mountains, the hidden kingdom began to shimmer into reality, no longer a myth. The lost souls had returned to their vessels. The king has taken his throne, a voice whispered through the trees. Stay back, please, Hadassah whispered, her voice cracking like dry parchment. The words felt like stones in her throat. She didn't recognize the sound. It was her own voice, yet it felt like a ghost returning to a haunted house. She squeezed her eyes shut, hoping the world would reset. But the damp scent of moss and the rush of the river stayed firm. Hadassah forced her eyes open. The sun was too bright. It stabbed at her vision until she blinked the haze away. Above her, the canopy of trees swayed in a gentle breeze. She wasn't at the great house anymore. The memory of Boaz's mother flashed in her mind. She remembered the woman's face. It had been twisted in a mix of terror and awe. Then, the fire had come. She looked at her hand. The burning was gone, but it left a mark behind. A dark, jagged crown was etched into her skin. It looked like ink, but it sat deep under her wrist, pulsing with a faint, cold energy. She rubbed at it until her skin turned red. The crown didn't fade. It didn't smudge. It was a part of her now. Hadassah sat up slowly. Her muscles ached as if she had run a marathon in her sleep. She was still in her old clothes, stained with dirt and grass. To her left, the sound of water called to her. Her throat felt like it was filled with sand. She stood up, her legs wobbling. Addery snap of a twig under her boots made her heart jump. She didn't know how she got to these woods. One moment she was on a porch, and the next, she was lost in a forest that felt too green, too perfect. The river appeared through the brush. It was crystal clear, reflecting the blue sky like a mirror. A family of squirrels sat by the bank, but they vanished into the trees the second she stepped into the clearing. Hadassah knelt by the water. She cupped her hands and drank deeply. The water was freezing and sweet. She splashed her face, trying to wash away the lingering fog in her brain. As the droplets fell from her chin, a heavy shadow fell over her. A hand touched her shoulder. Hadassah let out a sharp, jagged scream. She spun around, falling back onto the wet stones of the bank. Hadassah? Boaz stood there. He looked like he had been running. His hair was messy, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. He reached out a hand, then pulled it back as if he was afraid she might shatter. What are you doing here? Boaz asked. His voice was low and urgent. How did you find this place? Hadassah opened her mouth to use sign language. Her fingers began to move, but they felt stiff and useless. She looked at the crown on her wrist. She thought about the way the silence had protected her for so long. But the silence felt heavy now. It felt like a cage she didn't want to live in anymore. She remembered how Boaz looked at her when they first met. He wasn't like the others who got angry when she wouldn't speak. He was patient. He was kind. Hadassah looked up at him. She took a shuddering breath. It hurt, she rasped. The words were broken. She stuttered over the syllables, her tongue feeling heavy and clumsy. The burning. It started to hurt. Boaz froze. He didn't move for a long time. He stared at her as if she had just grown wings. You're talking, he breathed. Hadassah, you're actually talking. She held out her wrist to him. The black crown seemed to darken in the sunlight. I don't know why, she whispered. Boaz stepped closer. He didn't look at the mark yet. He only looked at her. He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over the ink. A spark of heat jumped between them, making Hadassah gasp. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Boaz's expression shifted. The shock turned into something darker. Something that looked a lot like fear. He looked around the woods, checking the shadows between the trees. "We shouldn't be out here," Boaz said, his grip on her hand tightening. "Not with that mark on you." "Why?" Hadassah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the river water. "What did I do?" Boaz pulled her to her feet. He was acting like they were being hunted. He didn't answer her. Instead, he kept his eyes locked on the forest path. "The burning wasn't an accident, Hadassah," Boaz said. "Tell me what's happening," she pleaded. Her voice was getting stronger, but her heart was racing. Boaz stopped and looked at her. He looked at the crown on her wrist and then back at her eyes. "That mark means you belong to a world you aren't ready for." Hadassah pulled her hand away. "I don't belong to anyone." "The crown says otherwise," Boaz countered. He stepped toward her, his shadow looming over her. "And the people who put it there are already looking for you." Hadassah backed up toward the water. "Who is looking for me?" Boaz didn't answer right away. He grabbed her arm, his eyes scanning the tree line again. He looked genuinely terrified for her. "We have to move," he insisted. "If they find you here, I can't protect you." "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the truth," Hadassah said, her voice steadying. Boaz leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The truth is, you didn't just wake up in the woods, Hadassah. You were summoned." Hadassah felt the ground tilt. "Summoned by who?" "By the king," Boaz whispered. "Look at your wrist," Boaz whispered. The girl stared at the mark for a long time. It was identical to his. It was larger than life and pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. Boaz felt a grin pull at his lips. His eyebrows shot up. She had finally spoken. She had opened up to him in this strange, misty place. Boaz cleared his throat to steady his voice. "That tattoo is the same as mine. It started to burn, didn't it? Then everything went black and you woke up here in this forest." The girl looked at him with wide, shocked eyes. She tried to form a word. Her throat moved as she struggled against the silence. "The same," she managed to gasp. "Hello, my dears." The voice was like silk and honey. It startled them both. Boaz spun around toward the sound. A woman stood under the canopy of ancient trees. She wore a flowing white gown that seemed to glow from within. Her hair was a shimmering silver gray that fell to her waist. She was beautiful in a way that didn't feel human. Despite the strangeness, a wave of calm washed over Boaz. The fear that had been clawing at his chest for hours simply vanished. He felt safe. He looked at the girl and saw the same tension leave her shoulders. "Who are you?" Boaz asked. His voice was much steadier now. The woman smiled. Her eyes sparkled with genuine excitement. "Well, first I would like to say hello to you too," she said. She took a step forward, her feet barely touching the mossy ground. "I am Luna. I am the mother of the werewolves." The girl froze. She stared at the woman as if she had grown a second head. She looked at Boaz, then back at the woman. Excuse me," she stammered. But I don't think that werewolves exist." Boaz winced. He couldn't look the girl in the eye. He kept his gaze fixed on Luna, whose expression had turned playful but knowing. "Oh, Boaz," Luna said. Her voice remained soothing, but there was a sharp edge of disappointment under the surface. "I think you are in a bit of trouble. You haven't told your beloved anything about our world, have you?" A sound escaped Boaz's throat. It wasn't a human sound. It was the low, submissive whimper of a beaten dog. He looked down at his boots. He started to fidget, his fingers twitching at his sides. He felt small under Luna's gaze. "I didn't tell her yet, Luna," Boaz whispered. He felt the girl's eyes on him, heavy with 1,000 questions. Luna clapped her hands together. The sound echoed through the trees like a gunshot. Well, we will have to tell her eventually. I have precious information for you both, but we can't stay here. She hummed a short, melodic tune. Then, her energy shifted instantly. She became a whirlwind of movement. Well, come on. What are you waiting for? Luna yelled. She didn't look back. We have places to be. Follow me. She took off into the deep woods. She moved with a speed that defied logic, her white dress flickering through the shadows like a ghost. Boaz didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl's hand and started to run. While their spirits moved through the woods of the goddess, their physical bodies remained behind in the mortal realm. They lay side by side in the pack infirmary. To any observer, they looked like they were merely in a deep sleep. The pack doctors paced the room. They were baffled. Artery test came back normal. Heart rates were steady. Breathing was rhythmic. Yet, the two would not wake. The only sign of anything unusual was the glowing mark on their wrists and the scent. A heavy, powerful aroma radiated off their skin. It smelled of rain, cedar, and ancient magic. It was a scent that commanded respect. News of the sleeping pair spread like wildfire. In the west, miles away from the pack house, a massive structure began to groan. An ancient castle, hidden by mist and forgotten by time, was waking up. For centuries, the halls had been silent. Now, the heavy oak doors creaked open. Dust was swept from stone floors. Stone-faced warriors sharpened their blades. Maids and butlers moved through the rooms with purpose. They didn't need to be told why. They felt it in their blood. Their rulers were coming. High in the mountain passes, figures in dark cloaks moved toward the castle. The witches were returning from exile. Sages woke from meditations that had lasted decades. The world was shifting. The balance of power was tilting toward the two souls currently lost in the forest. Back in the woods, Boaz pushed through a thicket of ferns. His lungs burned. He wanted to stop and explain everything. He wanted to tell the girl why his blood felt like fire. But Luna was pulling them deeper into the heart of the realm. Boaz tripped over a root but kept his grip on the girl's hand. He couldn't lose her now. Not when the truth was about to change everything she knew about her life. Luna, wait! Boaz shouted. The goddess stopped at the edge of a shimmering lake. She turned, her silver hair whipping around her face. She pointed toward the water. Do you see the reflection? Luna asked. Boaz looked into the water. He didn't see his own face. He saw something much larger, with golden eyes and thick fur. What is happening to us? The girl whispered. Where are we? Boaz whispered to the empty air. The forest was too bright. Colors popped against the vision like fresh paint. Red roses glowed with an eerie light. Strange plants twisted toward the sky. Boaz's chest felt tight as he pushed through the thick brush. He needed to find a way out. He needed to find someone. The sound of rushing water caught his ear. He followed the noise until the trees cleared. A girl sat by the riverbank. She was leaning over the water, scooping it up with her hands. Her back was turned to him. Boaz stepped forward. His boots crunched on the soft grass. He reached out and tapped her shoulder. The girl spun around and let out a piercing scream. Boaz jumped back. He stared at her in shock. It was Hadassah. Hadassah? What are you doing here? Boaz asked. She didn't answer with words. She tried to move her hands in signs, but they wouldn't follow her thoughts. She looked lost. Her face shifted from fear to a deep, heavy sadness. Then, her eyes narrowed. She looked angry. She grabbed her own wrist and held it out toward him. It started to hurt, she rasped. Her voice was shaky. It sounded like a rusted hinge moving for the first time in years. Boaz's heart sank. He remembered her blacking out. He remembered the heat from her skin. Your wrist started to burn, didn't it? He asked softly. Hadassah nodded. She didn't have time to say more. A new voice filled the air. It was warm and thick, like a heavy blanket on a cold night. It made Boaz feel safe the moment he heard it. A woman stood a few feet away. She wore a flowing white gown that seemed to glow. Her hair was a shimmering silver gray. She didn't just walk. She radiated power. Who are you? Boaz asked. He stepped in front of Hadassah. The woman smiled. She looked like she was having the time of her life. Well, hello to you too. I am Luna. I am the mother of all werewolves. Boaz froze. Addery instinct in his body told him to bow. This was the legend. This was the creator of his kind. Beside him, Hadassah looked even more confused. Excuse me, Hadassah stuttered. But, werewolves aren't real. Luna's smile faded into a look of disappointment. She looked at Boaz. Oh, Boaz. You are in so much trouble. You haven't told your loved ones anything about our world? Boaz felt a sharp pang of shame. His inner wolf whimpered. He lowered his head, unable to look the goddess in the eye. I didn't tell her yet, Luna, he whispered. Well, you have to tell her eventually, Luna hummed. She suddenly clapped her hands together. Come on. Why are you just standing there? We have places to be. Follow me. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and marched into the woods. Boaz and Hadassah shared a worried look but followed close behind. Boaz's mind raced. How was he supposed to explain monsters and magic to a girl who didn't even believe they existed? They walked until the trees opened up to a massive stone castle. It looked ancient, but the stone was clean and polished. Boaz felt Hadassah's hand tremble. She was excited and terrified all at once. As they entered the gates, a massive man blocked their path. He was bulky and tall. He wore clothes made of woven leaves. His brown hair was wild. He looked more like a tree than a person. He spoke to Luna in a language that sounded like rustling wind. Dears, this is Ephron, Luna said. He is the father of the land and the forests. Ephron looked at the two of them. He spoke again in that strange tongue. Then, he gave a wide smile and bowed low. He says he is happy to meet you and your mate, Luna translated. Hadassah shifted on her feet. Mate? Luna didn't answer. She skipped away toward the main hall. Boaz led Hadassah deeper into the castle. The floors were smooth white marble. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings. Everything felt heavy with history. A group of men in vests and carrying swords marched toward them. They stopped and bowed in unison. Your Highness, the leader said. This is Joab, Luna said, pointing to the lead warrior. He is our head warrior. The men moved past them quickly. Luna led Boaz and Hadassah into a large living room. The couches were made of soft, dark silk. I am going to leave you two here, Luna said. She pointed a finger at Boaz. You are going to explain everything to this lady. No one will interrupt you. She skipped out and slammed the giant wooden doors shut. Silence filled the room. Hadassah sat on the edge of the couch. She stared at her lap and twisted her fingers together. Werewolves? She asked quietly. Yeah, Boaz said. He took a deep breath. I'm one of them. I'm a werewolf. Hadassah looked up at him. Her eyes were wide. Do you turn into you know? I turn into a wolf, Boaz confirmed. But we are much bigger than normal wolves. It's part of who I am. He could feel her emotions swirling. She was overwhelmed. Her heart was beating so hard he could hear it from across the room. What did she mean? Hadassah asked. Why did she call me a beloved one? Boaz leaned back. He knew there was no more hiding the truth. She meant a soulmate. His inner wolf started to purr at the word. The bond was humming under his skin. A soulmate is a person you have an instant connection with, Boaz explained. The moment you meet, you feel drawn to them. It's a love so deep and complex that you start to doubt you ever loved anyone else before them. They understand you in every way. Being near them just feels like peace. He looked into her eyes. He forgot about the castle and the goddess. He only saw her. Hadassah tilted her head. But why did she call me your beloved? Boaz reached out and gently took her hand. Because you are my soulmate, Hadassah. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly why you're here, Luna said. She led the way into an office that felt like a step back in time. Dark wood covered the walls, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a Elisheban museum. Grayson stepped inside, his boots clicking on the polished floor. Beside him, Hadassah walked in silence. Ever since he had told her they were mates, she hadn't said a single word. She just stared at him with wide, unreadable eyes. He felt a knot of worry tighten in his chest. Was she going to reject him? Or was she simply too shocked to speak? Luna didn't give them time to process the silence. She moved behind a heavy desk, her expression urgent. We have to hurry, Luna said, her eyes darting between them. Time moves differently here than it does on Earth. One day in this realm is only an hour in yours. Your physical bodies can't sustain this connection for long. Hadassah's breath hitched. Then, our bodies. You look like you're in a deep sleep, Luna interrupted with a small, proud smile. Don't worry. But we must get to the point. Long ago, there was a kingdom called Zion. It was a place of peace, ruled by King Melchizedek and Queen Afi. Their people were kind, and the land was rich. But peace never lasts when someone greedy is watching. Grayson crossed his arms, listening intently. The name Zion felt strange on his tongue, like a memory he couldn't quite reach. A witch named Athaliah arrived, Luna continued. She brought shadows with her. She cursed the people, bending their wills to her own. The king and queen stayed locked in their castle, blind to the darkness spreading outside their gates. The queen was desperate for an heir, and the witch saw her opening. She tricked the queen, offering a way to conceive a child. That child was Prince Ishmael. Luna paced the small space behind her desk. Ishmael grew up and married a princess named Keturah. But Ishmael was smart. He saw the way the witch lingered in the corners of the palace. He grew suspicious of the woman his mother called a savior. He realized the only way to save his bloodline was to find me. He came here? Grayson asked. He did. He and Keturah fled to this realm to escape Athaliah's reach. While they were safe here, I realized the witch's curse on Ishmael was a ticking clock. I created two powerful souls, essences of pure light and strength, and released them to find hosts in the human realm. Those souls traveled through time and space until they found you. Grayson felt a strange heat beneath his skin. The witch, what did she really want? Power, Luna said, her voice dropping an octave. She wanted to rule every realm. She cursed Ishmael to become a monster of shadow, a creature she could use to tear down every kingdom in existence. She failed because he escaped, but her hunger hasn't changed. She is still out there, waiting. How did she fail if she's still waiting? Grayson pushed. The logic felt jagged. She lost her puppet, Luna explained. But the curse didn't die with the past. It transformed. It stayed hungry. Hadassah looked up, her voice surprisingly steady. Where are they now? Ishmael and Keturah? Luna didn't answer with words. She gestured for them to follow her. They walked down a long, echoing hallway toward a set of massive oak doors. When Luna pushed them open, the scent of blooming jasmine and old earth hit Grayson's nose. They were in a lush, sprawling garden. In the center stood an ancient tree, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. Beneath the shade of the tree sat two stone markers. Ishmael, Prince of Zion. Keturah, Princess of Zion. They passed a long time ago, Luna said, her voice laced with a sadness that made Grayson's wolf let out a low, mournful howl in the back of his mind. Before Ishmael died, he made me promise that the witch would be stopped. I cannot step onto earthly soil. That is why I sent the souls. Hadassah reached out, her fingers hovering over the cold stone. Where are the souls now? Luna stepped forward and took their hands, turning their palms upward. The tattoos they had discovered earlier began to glow with a soft, pulsing light. The souls are right here, Luna whispered. They chose us? Grayson asked, staring at the mark on his skin. Why us? Because the souls found something in you that no one else has, Luna said. A spark of the same courage Ishmael held. A bond that cannot be broken. What are we supposed to do? Hadassah whispered. You have to find Athaliah, Luna said firmly. You have to kill her and take your place as the leaders of all werewolves. Aden now, my servants are preparing a hidden castle on earth for your arrival. You will go there together. But you must remember one thing, the souls are linked. If you are separated by more than 15 feet, your strength will fade. You will crumble. The weight of the task felt like a mountain on Grayson's shoulders. Kill a witch? Rule the packs? He looked at Hadassah, who looked smaller than ever against the backdrop of the royal graves. It is time to return, Luna said, her form beginning to shimmer and fade like mist. Close your eyes. Count to 10. Your journey begins when you wake. Before Grayson could ask another question, the goddess vanished. The garden began to dissolve into white light. Let's go back, Grayson said, reaching for Hadassah's hand. He felt her small fingers lock with his. He shut his eyes tight. 1, 2, 3. By the time he hit 10, the smell of jasmine was replaced by the sharp, sterile scent of bleach and rubbing alcohol. Grayson opened his eyes to see a plain white ceiling. He was lying on a stiff mattress in the pack hospital. He turned his head to the side. Hadassah was in the bed next to his, her eyes wide as she stared at the same white ceiling. The silence between them was heavy, charged with the knowledge of what they were meant to become. We aren't just wolves anymore, are we? Hadassah whispered. You are my beautiful soulmate, Hadassah. Boaz's voice was low and steady. He had just finished explaining the depth of the werewolf bond. To him, a soulmate was everything. It was a tether to the world and a reason to survive. Hadassah couldn't find the words to respond. Her mind felt like a chaotic storm of new information. Before she could process the weight of his confession, the moon goddess had intervened. Luna led them through the towering halls of her realm toward a private office. The room felt ancient. It was decorated in a heavy Elisheban style with dark woods and velvet textures that seemed too real for a dream. Luna sat them down and began a tale of old kings and dark magic. She spoke of King Melchizedek and Queen Afi. She told them how a witch named Athaliah used trickery to tear a kingdom apart. Athaliah wanted more than just a throne. She wanted to rule every kingdom in existence. The story grew more complex as Luna described the son of the queen and the witch. Now, Hadassah lay in a sterile hospital bed. She stared at the white ceiling tiles. The memories of Luna's story spun around her head like a carousel. Across the small gap between the beds, Boaz watched her. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. The door swung open and a woman in medical scrubs rushed inside.